this episode, Andrew Maynard joins us. He is a scientist, author, and one of the nation's leading thinkers on socially responsible and ethical innovation. As director of the ASU Risk Innovation Lab, he is pushing the boundaries of how we think about risk and learn to succeed as we develop increasingly complex technologies. Andrew is also an active member of the World Economic Forum's Council on Nanotechnology. His work involves exploring the socially responsible and responsive development of emerging and converging technologies, including synthetic biology and gene editing, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence. Andrew's popular science/technology book, Films from the Future, explores socially responsible and ethical approaches to innovation through the lens of 12 science fiction movies, while his latest book, Future Rising, takes readers on a unique journey through humanity's relationship with the future and our responsibility to it. You can pre-order it using the link in the bio. I've already purchased my pre-ordered copy of the book. This episode will air during one of the most uncertain times I have ever experienced. The world is facing a big challenge with the outbreak of COVID-19, and it seems to be stress testing most, if not all, of the complex systems our daily lives rely upon, such as the economy, healthcare, court systems, geopolitics, and so forth. That being said, I am confident that we will excel in solving this challenge, and perhaps most importantly, that we will learn, and we must learn from this crisis, and start to take a more humble approach to life, rather than just continue to do the things we do as if nothing happened. This episode, and the books that Andrew has written, have taught me a lot about our relationship with the future and the responsibility we have to it. This conversation comes as a reminder that all of us are designers of the future, and we can create it as a better place than the one we came from. As Sam Harris puts it, without further delay, I bring you Andrew Maynard. I'm here with Professor Andrew Maynard, and I wanted to ask you, how would you describe your trajectory as of today?
How far back do you want to go? Since I was a little boy, or sort of bigger than that?
Well, anything that has influenced your...
Yeah. So I can tell you, I gave a talk the other day, and I had to answer exactly this question, and I ended up going back to when I was a young teenager, and I have a picture of me on a farm picking potatoes behind a tractor.
Wow.
It was the first proper job that I had. I was, I think, 13 or 14 years old at the time. And I sort of was talking about sort of, this is where I started, sort of picking up potatoes on a cold, wet sort of autumn afternoon. And then as I went on from there were only two things that I seemed to be good at: picking potatoes and physics. And it turns out that I wasn't very good at picking potatoes. So that's how I got into physics. But more seriously, my trajectory was I started off in physics. I loved physics. I couldn't really do anything else. Yeah. Ended up getting a PhD in electron microscopy of very small airborne particles, which I was told at the time was interesting but totally useless. Wow. So I ended up working in occupational health, looking at exposure to much bigger particles, the sorts of things like asbestos and dust in workplaces. But I found I was in that profession for about 10 years. And then at the end of the 1990s, people began to get really interested in nanotechnology and nanoscale materials. And all of a sudden, small particles were really trendy. So all of that training that I'd had 10 years ago suddenly became useful. And that got me really interested in new technologies. So nanotechnology was where I started, and I had the privilege of working with the US government on strategies there. But then everything opened up, and I began to realize that, first of all, there are incredible trends in technology innovation emerging, not just nanotech, but also in biology and in digital spaces and many other areas. But there are also incredible challenges there, both in terms of getting the technologies right, making sure that people actually benefit from them, making sure we don't make any stupid mistakes, and then helping people just understand what's going on and how they should be part of the conversations around developing these. So that's what pulled me out of the lab, out of science, and into working with a whole range of people, from policymakers to members of the public to non-government organizations. But it also got me interested in a lot of other things as well. So this is where the risk comes in and the science communication comes in, and playing around with things like science fiction movies as a way of helping people understand how the future is unfolding.
Yeah, definitely. That's the part of that I was
Yeah.
most shocked about listening to future films for the future. I listened to it. It was a great narration. I was shocked because, as you say, future involves everyone in the and everyone hopefully gets towards that future we're building. So why hasn't anyone, or why isn't everyone included in this conversation? And I love the fact that you can mesh up and unite the idea of sci-fi movies and use them to have a practical sense of what's happening in the world and what will happen. So I think that's a great thing. And also what you said about the particles, I remember in your book you said that mining was a problem and people who were mining. So yeah, and I think that's happening. That's still happening, right?
It is. So and that is, of course, so interesting because mining, at least modern day mining, coal mining, is a direct result of the Industrial Revolution, where we needed to get more fuel out of the ground in order to quite literally fuel the revolution. And it was great. It was transformative because we ended up with steam power, we ended up with electricity. It changed the world. But at the same time, these miners digging the coal out of the ground were exposed to these very dangerous particles that ended up giving them lung disease. So we had people dying, and we were building the future on the backs of those people dying. And my grandfather was one of those people that got pneumoconiosis, this disease of the lungs, and ended up dying of it. So it's a really salutary reminder that even today, we're building the future on the backs of people that are suffering for it, which is not a great place to be.
No, definitely. And as you say, there are many themes in the book, films from the future, as well as futurizing that I didn't think about. For example, complex systems. I used to think that as a system becomes more complex, it is more difficult to bend. But it's actually quite the opposite. And this is rather counterintuitive. And it is a perfect timing to be thinking about this and meditating about the systems that we're creating and the future of the buildings, the foundations of these systems that we're building. Right now, with what's happening with the coronavirus, COVID-19, we've just seen for the past week volatility that, at least during my lifetime, I haven't seen.
I've never seen anything quite like this either. It's quite incredible, both how fast things are moving, how uncertain things are, and again, you see this interplay between different systems, which is leading to quite unpredictable results.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I remember that in 2008, with the financial crisis, my father was a bit anxious. A lot of anxiety was around the world, but I wasn't conscious of what all this meant for everyone. This is amazing because I follow baseball a lot, and right now is spring training, and you see all the players being interviewed, and they're talking like people. Like this is going to get to everyone, no matter if you're a baseball player, no matter if you're the Brazil's president, anyone. And I think it is a great opportunity because you're a health and risk expert. If there are any thoughts, I saw that you uploaded a YouTube video, and I will add a link to it in the bio. But your thoughts about what's happening with the coronavirus, COVID-19?
Yeah, so I should say up front, yes, I have risk expertise and I have public health expertise, but I'm not a leading expert on infectious diseases and coronavirus and COVID-19, the disease. But having that said, I work with people that do understand these circumstances and how to respond. And the video that I put up, so this is part of a long time project that I've had in communicating around risk and science. This is the Risk Bites YouTube on YouTube. The Risk Bites channel on YouTube. And we put it up. I was actually working with a couple of colleagues who are experts here. And we felt that we needed to do something, and this is leading into a direct response to your question, but it's a bit of a long preamble. We felt we needed to do something specific to people that weren't getting advice that was useful. And that particular group of people is students. So certainly in the US and actually in many other countries now, universities are either being closed down or classes are going online, and students are being told that if you've been exposed to the coronavirus or you think you might have been exposed, to self-isolate. But of course, if you're a student, what do? I mean, you're living with other students. It's hard for you to sort of stockpile food. You don't have much money anyway. Who's going to tell you how you actually do this? And there's no advice out there, or at least if there is, it's really buried. So we thought we'd put this video together that was a really easy guide for students. But importantly to me, it actually contains information which you're seeing from other places, which is generally good information, which is, yes, if you think you've been exposed, keep your distance from other people and sort of self-isolate, but realize that this is going to be difficult. And it means things like if you do have to go out, make sure that you're not touching surfaces that are potentially contaminated. If you do touch surfaces, make sure you wash your hands. I mean, everybody's saying this now, wash your hands with soap for 20 seconds. Soap is incredibly good at getting rid of the virus.
Yeah.
Make sure you've got, if possible, hand sanitizer around. It's not as good as soap, but it's a good first step. If you've been out of your apartment or dorm or whatever, when you come back, use it to just sort of kill off anything that's immediately on your hands, especially if you can't get soap and water. Yeah. Don't cough in people's faces. Really, really basic advice. But the thing that really got me with this, with students, is it's really easy. If you're if you're really fairly well off, you're in a stable job, you're middle class, and somebody says, go and work from home for 2 weeks or stay at home for 2 weeks, it's not too difficult to do. And you've got a larder full of food. If you're a student, or say you're a worker in retail or the service industry, it's incredibly difficult to do that. And things like, where do you get food from? Is it okay to order food? Or is it not okay? So one of the things that we put in here was, it's actually okay to phone places up and get them to deliver food. It's just be sensible. Ask them to leave it outside your door so you're not having intimate contact with those people. Yeah. But it's really basic stuff like this that I think makes a lot of sense. And of course, we talk a lot about flattening the curve now. Yeah. And the biggest challenge, I think, with COVID-19 is not that it's highly fatal, because it isn't for most people. The figures are still sort of changing, but for most healthy people, it seems to be around about sort of 0.2 to 0.4% sort of fatality. But the thing is, you don't want to spread it around, because if too many people get it, you overload the healthcare system, and then you really do plunge an economy into crisis. So everything we can do to slow the spread is going to be good. And that's really what comes out in the video. And I think that seems to be some of the most sensible advice at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for it. And I'll add a link in the bio, because I saw it myself. And even though I don't have any dorm roommates, I'm a college student, and I still go to classes right now.
Right.
I think classes are going to be canceled. Mine, as of today, has been canceled, one class. And we're moving towards an online community. And some are saying that a good technique to wash your hands for 20 seconds is sing the birthday song for 2 times.
Happy birthday, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I didn't want to start talking about films from the future the opposite way, chapter 12 with Inferno.
Right.
But yeah, I swear I was listening to it, and I couldn't stop thinking about how it all measures up as of what's happening today. I think everyone should read the book, because it's not sci-fi. It's
right.
something happening. I mean, not in
the extreme, but the ideas there, and the circumstances, and I think in the scenarios make you think.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope that no one invented this virus,
That's right. Yeah, and the conspiracy theories were very quick to sort of come out with people thinking maybe it had been invented, and I don't think there's any evidence at all for that. But it does make you think, because what happens, it doesn't really matter in the sense where it comes from, whether it's naturally evolved or whether it's been invented. It still plunges us into social crisis.
Definitely. And as well, after finishing Films from the Future, I went and read Future Rising, and I kept thinking about hubris and humility and how all of these things, intertwine. And
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, do you think that right now, are we going to take a more humble response about the way we care of the future, or are we going to still turn a blind eye on and go
I
ahead?
I hope we take a more humble approach to the future. I don't know whether we will, and I think it'll be different in different cultures. Certainly, there are some cultures that are more willing to accept that there's stuff to learn and you might be wrong, and others, and I must confess, I'm talking about the United States here,
Yeah.
where the attitude is that we know how to do everything. But I think if this outbreak is teaching us everything, it's that we live in a precarious and uncertain world,
Mhm.
and we've got to have humility in the face of that. And that's how we build resilience, by recognizing that we don't know everything. Sometimes we get things wrong. Sometimes we've got to listen to other people and learn from them and work together to build a better future.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I wanted to ask you now, moving towards the films from the future and
Hmm.
futurizing. Films from the future is, you know, for me it was a practical guide. I could
Yes.
say that. And I wanna tell you something I'm thinking, when I don't plan on having kids anytime soon, but I want them to read it because I want to see how do they react on saying, hey father, like this has existed quite a long time, and for me it's
Hmm.
just beginning, it hasn't even existed. So I wanna have a experiment, if I can say that, with them, with your book.
Yes.
And even that the films from the future is a practical guide, I feel like futurizing is more of a philosophical approach to things. And
Yep.
I wanted to listen to your thoughts about this.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So yes, the whole idea behind Films from the Future was helping people think about not only the pros and cons of new technologies, but understand how they can think about the social consequences so that they can be part of the process of building better, more socially responsible technologies. So it is a very practical guide. And of course, it uses science fiction movies, but that's only the start. It
Yeah.
uses them to raise questions around power and social justice and ethics and morality, which are critically important to actually building really good new technologies.
Yeah.
But then with futurizing, I ended up, and I didn't really expect to do this, but this is how it came out. It's very much more a philosophical, reflective book about the nature of the future and our relationship to it. So I describe it as a book that explores our relationship with the future and our responsibility to it,
Mhm.
not in terms of a practical guide, but helping people think about what their responsibility is to helping others build a better future.
Yeah. And I love the whole chapters when it says humility, imagination, curiosity, and
Right.
all of those ideas that are the cornerstone notions or values that we must have while looking at the future. And during these times, it all
And
goes into perspective.
yeah, and so that's very much how I feel. So something I did with the book, which again surprised me when I started writing it, but I was quite pleased with it. I was originally asked to write a book about the future as an object, and I remember that conversation with a colleague. So I thought this is a crazy idea. The future isn't an object. But I went away and I thought, actually, this might work. And I thought it might work because clearly we need a different way. Everybody needs a different way of thinking about the future and using that to understand their relationship with it. And I began to think, well, if I was going to do this, I need to tell a story about our relationship with the future. Um, and that story actually has to start with the nature of what the future is. So what ended up coming out was a book that actually starts with physics. It starts with the Big Bang.
Yeah.
So we actually talk about the physics of the future and the past and
Mhm.
time. And then we talk about how that led to the formation of simple organisms, and through evolution, organisms such as ours that have this not only intelligence, but this ability to imagine different futures and actually go about creating them. And then that leads to this big question about responsibility. If we have this awesome ability to imagine a different future and to actually engineer and design and construct it, how do we do that in a responsible way? So
Yeah.
it ended up with this very interesting to me journey that goes from physics to metaphysics, even to
Mhm.
the humanities, to the sense of social responsibility.
Yeah, and it also touches on us going to Mars and leaving
It
Earth
does.
behind. And I didn't know this, that there was a metaphor that Earth was like a spaceship. That's amazing.
Yes, yes. And this is going back to the 60s. In fact, I think even before the 1960s, people were thinking about this. But yes, this idea that we're all together on this spaceship hurtling through space. But then, of course, if we ever do get to Mars or even the moon, we're basically creating another spaceship for ourselves.
Yeah, and that's I think I dare to say that your book Futurizing will help a lot of people, including myself, to think. No, I don't want to say think twice about what we're doing, but think consciously about what's going to be the future that we want to create.
I really like that way of putting it. Yes, that idea of consciously thinking about what we can do, what we can
Yeah.
do together.
Yeah, because sometimes life just keeps happening, and we keep going our ways without thinking about, hey, what are we thinking of doing? So I I know that you mentioned a lot of times Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Origin and their plans of going to the moon and to Mars, but I think that this book can truly make us think twice of, hey, this is our spaceship. It just needs maintenance, right?
Right. Yes, it's not going to look after itself. We have to do a little bit of looking after.
Yeah, and this is a question from I'm gonna, if I confuse you, my intention is to try to connect films from the future with futurizing, so my head is around thinking of all of these ideas. But I remember my father's favorite sci-fi show was Star Trek. And a lot of things that happened were shown in Star Trek are technologies that we use now, or at least we're thinking of. We're on the verge of creating them.
Right.
So, what's the relation between sci-fi movies and the technologies we create? Do you think Star Trek like started to create the narratives for us to create the technologies, or did we see back into Star Trek? Or
Yeah, so this is a question that a lot of people grapple with, and I'm not sure there's a really clear answer, because again, you're going back to complex systems, and who knows where the beginning of the thread is. But I think there are two or three things that are really clear here. One is there's been at least two generations of scientists and engineers who have been inspired by Star Trek. So they've seen everything from the communicators to the food replicators, and they've thought, that's a really cool idea. I wonder whether we can do something similar. And even if it's just been an inspiration for another type of technology, there is that connection between the two. And you see this actually with other science fiction movies. It doesn't happen that often, but certainly you have scientists and engineers and technologists that are inspired enough by science fiction that it just fuels their creativity with what they come up with. So you've got that, but you've also got this relationship where science fiction movies and including Star Trek, the technologies you see are actually inspired by what scientists and engineers are already talking about. So these things aren't created out of nothing. They come out of somewhere. And so you've got this almost like virtuous cycle between the scientists coming up with something, the creative writers writing it into the script, and the scientists looking at it and saying, hey, that's cool, and coming up with something else. And so it goes.
Yeah, and it's amazing, like going into the movie you mentioned, for example, Minority Report and surveillance, and what's happening. I don't know if while you were writing the book, the notion of the social credit system in China was happening.
It was, and I didn't include that because it didn't fit in with the story, but that was definitely emerging at the time. Yes, so you can see how rapidly things change in terms of. So I remember 5-10 years ago, people weren't talking seriously in public about surveillance systems. To the extent that you see in movies like Minority Report. And now, yes, you've got the social credit system in China, you've got ubiquitous surveillance elsewhere. You even look at countries like the United States, where people are actually buying technology like Amazon Alexas or the Ring doorbells that are surveilling them and surveilling everybody around them. And they don't seem to be bothered by it.
No, and I think it's a vicious circle because I'm not sure if we're even aware that Alexa can can listen to us all the time.
Many people aren't. And so this is actually one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because it's so easy for people to just accept technologies into their lives without thinking about the consequences.
Exactly.
And as a result, somebody else is using them. They're using their data, they're using them as subjects, and they're using the information they get out of them to not only manipulate their lives, but other people's lives. And it's easy to do if people aren't asking questions.
Yeah.
But as soon as people start asking questions and realizing what's happening, they can control the conversation, or at least be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I've seen that. For example, there's a company right now called FAMA, and I think they use your Twitter account, for example, to see if you're a potential employee.
Right.
And they don't even see your tweets. They see what you like and what you don't like. If there's a wrong word in it, and if there's like
I hadn't heard this. What's the name of the company again?
FAMA.
FAMA. I need to look this up, because this is the sort of thing that we track, because you can clearly see the potential downsides of that.
Yeah, because imagine I go to an interview, I nail the interview, and then even if it's a sarcastic tweet and it made me laugh and it says something quite wrong sarcastically, but the computer, it's an artificial intelligence machine,
yes,
doesn't know the difference between sarcasm, and then they send you a report, like a PDF, saying this is why we suggest the company doesn't hire you.
right, and the consequences are really quite significant.
Yeah. And as Minority Report, we're treating people like not ends but means,
that's exactly it. And I think we're allowing computers to have too much control. So, and I, very similar to that, one of the examples I use in the Minority Reports chapter is this idea of Veris Prime, which is a company marketing this screening tool that tells an employer whether you're likely to turn out to be a white-collar criminal or not. And anybody can take the test. But the test results are based on a small group of white-collar sort of felons that they developed it around. And it turns out that most of my academic colleagues that took it, they came out as having high criminal tendencies, because it turns out that academics have got the similar sorts of traits as these people.
Yeah. I laughed when I listened to it, because, I mean, we're academics,
Right.
What do you think? We're independent people. Does that mean we're criminals?
That's right. We like sort of asking interesting questions and cutting corners and finding different ways of doing things.
Yeah, and Douglas Rushkoff was a guest here on this podcast. He is the writer of Team Human, which he argues that technology should be used to create improvements in humans' lives rather than the opposite. Humans create better technologies. And I really encourage you to contact him, because I think you two would have an amazing conversation. And because both of you are talking about important things. And he mentioned that he's not so concerned about computers passing the Turing test, because they already achieved such a great amount of intelligence. But he's concerned because we would not be able to define, or we will be stupid enough not to see that they're
right
better. No. So my question here is that, do you think that computers can fool us into believing that they're smart enough?
Possibly, yes. So there are lots of nuances to the question and to the answer. So the first thing is, computers aren't human. Computer circuits are nothing like our brains. They are different as chalk and cheese. And so it's very dangerous to think of computers in terms of human attributes, including human intelligence. And I think we're a long way from having a computer that shows anything like human intelligence. Just the architecture is totally different. And yet, I think that it's possible to get some forms of what you might call intelligence in computers that maybe we don't fully recognize. And maybe lead to computers or machines being able to manipulate us because of that. So again, this is one of the examples I use in the book. If you look at machine learning and smart machines or intelligent machines, they have been created in an environment which is totally alien to us. This is the cyber environment. And we created this environment, but because we don't live in it, we don't fully understand it. It's a little bit like a fourth dimension. We know it's there, but we don't fully sort of feel it in our guts, in our soul. But machines do. This is where they live. This is where they thrive. And so it's entirely feasible that we create a machine that can live in that environment, and it can see us for what we are, including all our limitations and all our biases. And it can work out how to manipulate us, which buttons to press, which levers to pull to get humans to do what they want us to do.
Wow.
And we know that this is possible because this is what we do as humans. I mean, with our social interactions, we're always, to a certain extent, manipulating others. But we're on a level playing field. We're all pretty much in the same field. So we're all as good or as bad at each other as doing it, which gives us something of an advantage. You put a computer in the mix that doesn't have the same biases, you've suddenly got the equivalent of the one-eyed person in the land of the blind.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And that, as you said, this completely blew my mind, because you argue that the internet and the web is a fifth dimension, and I never thought about it ever before.
Right.
So thank you for that. And so I have two questions here, because I believe they're very important. You mentioned human brains and trying to create, for example, the ex machina brain.
Right.
But my question here is, do you think, would it be better for us to completely have a full picture of the brain before we create an artificial one? Or do you think they work together? And my second question, if you care to answer the first one or the second one, is biases. So I keep thinking about, I have biases myself. I try to confirm them all the time.
Right.
And how can we create a computer that doesn't have biases, coming from humans that have biases?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So dealing with the first one, the human brain, I think we need to think differently. So we're a long, long way from understanding or even mapping the human brain. So
Yeah.
I think when it comes to machines, the first question is, what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve here?
Mm-hmm.
If we're trying to just mimic humans, I think that's actually quite a boring goal, but it's one that we're actually not going to survive, or we're not going to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
because we just don't understand the architecture there. Far better to create something with specific goals in mind that is interesting, a different sort of intelligence, an intelligence ideally that can coexist with us and actually enhance what we can do, so we can develop relationships and cooperative agreements with this intelligence.
Yeah.
That to me is much more exciting, and it means that we can learn from the brain, but we don't have to be constrained by what we know or don't know about the brain.
Oh.
So that's the first part of that. The second part, remind me. The
Yeah.
biases. Yes. So biases are difficult because, I would agree with you. We all have our blind spots. There's no way we can get around that, which means that every piece of technology we create, including machines that think for themselves, are
Mm-hmm.
going to reflect our blind spots. And the only way I've ever been able to work out how to get around that is this idea of humility, recognizing our limitations and always being open to having others reveal those limitations so we can overcome them. So that means that we have to have that humility as we develop technologies. We have to have that humility to admit that sometimes we're wrong and sometimes we need to learn to do things differently. But it also makes me wonder, do we need to create machines that have their own form of humility, that actually recognize that they may have their biases? So they're constantly asking maybe other machines, other people, am I doing this right? Am I missing something? Do I need to learn something new?
Yeah. And as you mentioned a lot of times in Futurizing, one of the beautiful things about planning for the future is the question of the what if. No?
Yes.
And what if we create computers that don't try to prove their theories as we try to do with ours, and instead try to, try to make them wrong? No?
Right.
Would that change things?
Yeah. See, that to me, that's when things get interesting, because you're creating the future in a way that you're leaving possibilities open for something serendipitous, something totally different, something amazing.
Yeah. And going back to the first part of my question of brains, you said that we should have a goal in mind, and
Yeah.
I also talked about this with Douglas Rushkoff. He said that there are people who are transhumanists, which you mention a lot in your
Hmm.
books, and it seems that their argument is, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm wrong because I probably am, but what I think, what I believe that I get from that idea is that they think it's another step from our evolution.
Right.
And do you think, is this an accurate thing? And should we plan on this?
So yes, that's my understanding. They see the merging of humans with machines as the next step in our evolution, or it's the step where we make a break from our biological inheritance.
Wow.
I actually think that they're wrong, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that will disagree with me. But I think they're wrong because if you look at every technological system, every machine, it's a fragile, a vulnerable system. It doesn't have the resilience of biology. Biology, over billions of years, has developed into an incredibly resilient system. And it's resilient because every cell contains the base code, the blueprint, if you want to use that language, for recreating that system.
Mhm.
And that means no matter what you do, you can still sort of create biological systems. You can take, this gets very crude, but you can take your body and you can chop it up into a gazillion bits, and you can still pull out something of use, something which is data rich from each one of those little bits. You take a machine like the computer in front of me and chop it up into a gazillion little bits, and it's worthless.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing with transhumanism is we're creating a chimera between biology and machines, where the first thing that goes wrong, that chimera becomes useless. It doesn't have the resiliency of biology. And that's where I think that the transhumanists' ideas fail, because you're not building a system which is resilient and self-sustaining.
Yeah, definitely. And that it hasn't been for millions of years. And has,
Right, that's right. So I think it's interesting. I think we can do amazing things, but I think there's always a very high probability that if we build a future where we're more machine than we are biology, it's only going to take one or two things to go wrong where everything collapses and we're back to just biology again.
yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And as you say, we can't, you know, take our biology for granted. I mean, it has
Right.
existed for eons of years. And I want to ask you about the difference between possibility and
Hmm.
probability, because
Yes.
I keep having a confusion about this.
Yes, yes. So, and I use this language a lot, because I sometimes get very frustrated with people talking about new technologies and talking about possibilities. So, within reason, many things are possible, but very few things are probable.
Oh,
So, it might be a possibility that one day we discover a Star Trek light warp drive, which allows us to go at faster than light speeds.
yeah.
Um, but the probability is incredibly low. So yes, we can dream about it, but I wouldn't start investing in companies that are trying to develop that technology, because I think we're probably thousands or tens of thousands of years away from that. So
Yeah.
that to me is the difference between what's possible and what is actually likely or probable.
No. Yeah. And one of the things that continues, well, has been possible for a long time, but continues to be more probable, is the notion of universal basic income.
Aha,
And,
yes.
and
That
I
was a
wanted
nice transition. Yes.
thank you. And I wanted to ask you that. So Yuval Harari says that, for in Homo Deus, he wrote that this, there is quite a uh, great chance that people will get displaced from their jobs, which I know
Mhm.
you're concerned about as well,
Yes.
due to the automation of the industries. And he says that it is a good opportunity to start creating the universal basic income. And he sets the example for in Jerusalem, the Jewish Orthodox, who receive a monthly income to achieve spirituality and to
Mhm.
have like a self-discovery on their own. And do you think that universal basic income, on one hand, is more feasible right now, and on the other, do you think we're created to self-explore ourselves without work?
Yeah, so this is such a tricky one. And I can tell you my thinking has changed in recent years. So if you would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago about UBI, universal basic income, I'd have said, I can't see it working. And I would have said, I can't see it working because people, no, this is going to sound bad. I was going to say people are selfish and lazy, and that's actually not true. But we have enough evidence that, at least for some people, if you give them something without an expectation of a return on that, they will passively expect you to carry on giving to them.
Wow.
However, I've actually changed my perspective on that for a couple of reasons, and this sort of comes to sort of whether I think that the time is right for UBI. I think that there are always going to be people where if you give them something without them working for it, they'll take advantage of it. But there are going to be far more people that see that as an opportunity to do something positive for themselves and ultimately for society. More importantly than that, and if you look at society around the world, there are so many people that are caught up in the trap of just not being able to earn enough through their work to be able to actually get out of the pit that they're in, or the rut they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And UBI could be utterly transformative in terms of just giving them that little lift in order to start creating a life for themselves. And to me, that's the most compelling thing here. I don't care about the small number of people who are going to abuse it. I care about the large number of people whose lives are going to be transformed by it. Now, will we see this happen? I think that the conversation has transformed literally in the last 12, 24 months from this is a crazy idea to maybe there's something here. So maybe we are at a tipping point here. I would like to think we are. But at the same time, people are selfish sometimes, lazy sometimes, very conservative sometimes, and they don't necessarily like change. So I don't know where it's going to go. I would like to think that we can actually change the system and do something great here.
Yeah, and as we keep talking about it, we're in a complex system and we don't know what will unfold, but we could say that it is more probable that there are more people who are good in the world and who
Yes.
will try to use the money to make better things. And at the same time, it is inevitable that this money will go to businesses, other people, and the economy as a whole. So I think I I can't say that I have a position because I need to ask
Right.
experts as you. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for your answer. And
Yeah. And I would actually just add, I think if you say you look at somebody who is full of potential and yet they're working 2 jobs a day in order to put food on the table for their
wow.
kids, a roof over their head, and they're deep in debt, they
Mhm.
don't have any time to even begin to think about that potential.
Yeah.
And just imagine what we could do if we could give them something that says, we're going to take some of that burden away from you so you can expand to be the human, the person you could be.
I,
That to me is quite incredible.
yeah, that's a great way to put it. Thank you. And I, I agree. I mean, we're in. I dare to say that most of us didn't, plan to do the things we're doing right after we were born, and
Right,
we're
right.
we're, we're trying to figure out ourselves, and it is not fair, as you say, that to a person who's working two works a
Mhm.
day, 2 jobs, hasn't doesn't have the time to explore
Right.
oneself. So I agree with that. And yeah, so switching gears a bit, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned a lot of times that technologies create uncertain futures and ones that we can't foresee.
Hmm.
And so how is it possible that we could price in the uncertainty variable in the
Yeah.
technologies we use?
Yeah. Um, so I don't think we can. I
Oh,
think there is always going to be uncertainty, but there's another way of looking at the challenge, and that is thinking in terms of agility and resilience. So we can never know the future. We can never plan completely for the future,
mhm.
but we can set up our lives and our society and our systems so as the future changes, we can take advantage of emerging threads and strands in the future, and we can navigate around things which might otherwise trip us up. If that makes sense. So the resilience is us being able to thrive no matter what the future brings. The agility is us being able to respond really rapidly to emerging opportunities or emerging challenges.
And do you think that the complexity gives advantage to being us being agile, or is it, because I
It
think that particular idea is getting into like a stress test right now during these
right,
tests.
right. So so there are multiple sides to complexity. Complexity can lead to systems that fail very rapidly. So that the classic example is in a complex system, everything will look great until you end up with that tipping point where the smallest thing leads to the system collapsing. So that's a fragile, complex system. But you can also have resilient, complex systems that are adaptable.
Mm.
And because you've got such complexity there, no matter how the circumstances change, they're able to change in response to that. So biology is an adaptive complex system.
Mm.
It's not fragile in the way that, say, our power distribution systems tend to be, where sometimes one stick shorting one line can take out whole districts of power.
Wow. Yeah. No, definitely. I agree that Th- that's that's one of the main themes that I will get after our conversation is that biology and our that's another question, but our what makes us human is
Yes,
valuable. Is valuable.
right.
We have to talk about it because and that's another question. What makes us human? What makes us us? And
Yep.
could we have a universal definition of it before as you talk about it in your book, in both of your books, cloning,
Yes.
before we start cloning other people, and before we start talking about artificial intelligence's rights, because what if they're conscious sentient beings?
That's exactly it. And so isn't this so interesting that
Yeah.
for the first time in human history, we're at a point where we can actually conceive of creating something which is not human, but has some form of value or sentience. And we've got to take seriously the fact that we need to understand its rights. We've never
Wow.
been in this position before. And I don't think there are any good answers to this, but it's vitally important that we begin thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I, but it also ties into this question of what makes us human. To me, is an incredibly important one,
Hmm.
and we can take that multiple different ways. So I increasingly think that what makes us human is how we respond to other people and other organisms and other things. It's not necessarily something that's inherent in us, but it's how we actually express ourselves.
Wow.
And I'll give you an example. This may seem like a really trite, silly example, but you've no doubt seen the videos from, I think it's Boston Dynamics, with the robots that look like animals.
I saw it yesterday, actually.
Right, right. And you have a lot of these tests where you've got people sort of kicking them and hitting them to see whether you can sort of put them off their stride. And you can
Yeah.
argue, well, they're just machines. It doesn't really matter what we do. I think what makes us human is how we respond to even a machine like that. And not only how that type of response makes us feel, but how it makes other people feel. So I watch those videos and it makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And it's not because we're hurting or harming the machine, but it's because it shows me the soul of the person that's doing the hurting. And to me, being human is being aware that you don't do things that reveal a darkness in your soul like that. I know that's getting a little bit metaphysical, but I don't know whether that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does a lot, and I never thought about it before. And yeah, and one, as you say in Future Rising, one of the things that um, include our humanity is the, as right now you said, is the way we express ourselves and the humanity of us. And one of those is art, and you mentioned it in your book, which
Right.
it's a great thing because I I've seen, in school and throughout history classes and everything, the building structures of the 18th century and 17th century and everything, and now I'm seeing them today, which look very futuristic but very standardized.
Okay. Yes.
Probably they thought about this back then. They said, "Oh, this looks normal." Now we're like, "Yeah, that looks great, and this looks normal." But my question here is, do you think we're pricing in, to use the word that I used before, art in our technologies?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I again, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to twist it around a little bit and say we've got to take art and creativity. Let's start that. Art and creativity. My brain and my lips are out of sync. We've got to take art and creativity seriously with our technology, because technology without them it has no humanity.
Yeah.
Um, our creativity, our imagination, and our art, and how it comes out of that, in some ways actually reflects and defines who we are.
Definitely.
And if we divorce our technology from that, our technology becomes inhuman at the extreme.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. And what's paradoxical about this is that we humans are creating inhuman technology. So what does that say about us? That's
Well, that's right.
mind-blowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a whole different question. And you talk about it in Futurizing and Films of the Future, the question of morality and ethics.
Yep.
So you mentioned Never Let Me Go. I never saw it, and I saw it when I
Right.
listened to the book, which is amazing. And I think of I have a moral reaction to that idea of cloning someone and then just you weren't born as a fetus, and so therefore you're not human. But
Right.
and at the same time, we have humans here on Earth that we see as less than human, as you say.
Yes.
That's staggering because our, and I dare to say, faults of the way we treat ourselves, we are thinking of treating others, which are in a way arguably humans, but we're cloned. So
Yes. So actually that is such an interesting link, and I'm not sure it's one that I've made completely, but it's really valuable. So yes, the power of that movie is that you develop this emotional, empathetic connection with these clones that are treated as just things within that society. And you're deeply shocked when you see how they're treated. And it makes you think, these are valuable human beings. They should be treated with equity and justice and respect. But you're exactly right. As we're watching this and we're thinking this and we're empathizing with these clones, we live in a world where we treat other people as lesser. And the message has got to be, we've got to look at ourselves and we've got to reevaluate our own relationships and our own response to other people, even before we get to the technology of the clones.
yeah, and as you say, this could be a game changer in terms of how we see other humans and humans that are clones. And I remember that you say an example about someone who was in vitro and asked if she had a soul.
That's exactly it. Yes, yes. I was amazed to sort of come across this conversation. Somebody who was conceived through IVF, and she said, "I don't know whether I have a soul because I wasn't naturally conceived," and it quite literally broke my heart. I was in tears reading that because I'm thinking, of course you're a person, of course you're valid, of course you are equal with everybody else around you. But it just shows how deep some of these things go.
Yeah, definitely. And one, this is I don't want to forget about it because I was thinking about this while listening to, there was a treaty signed, a declaration signed by three prominent scientists. And
Hmm.
I think you mentioned it, and I think it was on that chapter.
It was. This is, I forget what it was called, but it was a declaration on cloning.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my question here was, right now we're talking about soul. So
Yes.
I was asking, do you think, I was asking myself, do you think that all of these scientists and experts who were um, signing the declaration believe in God and soul itself? Do you think that's,
Yeah. So I can't remember everybody that was on that list, but certainly some of them are associated with the atheist movement. And so there's a fair degree of certainty that they believe that what makes us is just our biological components, that there is nothing special and unique that you might call a soul. They might say that there is an emergent property which looks like a soul, but that would exist irrespective of whether you're naturally conceived or whether it's IVF or whether you're a clone.
yeah. And look, Professor, this sounded like trying to give, say that they're wrong, but that's not my intention. A lot of my intention
Right.
is that, you know, even if we prove that there is no soul, which that's a whole different topic if I
Very
believe,
much. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
even if we prove that we're only our biological selves, that doesn't take the spark and the serendipity of, as you say, of humans.
Right.
We can see the future and we can see the past, and and blows my mind. And I don't think that's a game changer at
I
all.
I would agree. And I think if we focus on what is amazing about us and what is amazing about others, and even what is amazing about other species,
Yeah,
and we bring sort of respect and honor and humility to the table with that, I actually think this conversation about is there a soul or isn't a soul becomes certainly diminished because it's not the center of the conversation. In fact, in some ways, it's a very hubristic conversation, sort of saying we're going to judge on whether you've got a soul or not. I think it's far more humble to say that you are a creation that we're going to learn from, we're going to respect, and we're going to honor.
Yeah, definitely. And one could argue that us talking about souls can create the soul itself, you know?
Right.
That's amazing. That's rather metaphysical, and sorry about that. Yeah, so I wanted to go one more question about Never Let Me Go, because it really struck me, because the whole notion of all men are created equal can be put to test with this. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'd say a little bit more about what you mean about all men or all people are created equal.
Yeah, so we all can argue that all men are created equal and all people are created equal, and
yes,
this is seen in all of the Declaration of Human Rights and everything.
Right. Yes.
So and I think that could be put into test as well, because, you know, if we're cloning someone, should we consider them?
Sure. So it really stretches that declaration. So what I would say is, as humans, as a species, this is something for us to decide. It is not something which is absolute. There is nothing outside humanity, certainly from my perspective, that says everybody is equal. This is a decision we need to make as a society. I would argue very strongly that the right decision, the moral decision, is to treat everybody as equally valuable. I mean, they may be different, they may have different ideas and traits and perspectives, but everybody is equal in terms of their importance and their value. But that's got to be a decision that we all make and we all buy into.
Yeah, I agree with that. And what I've learned from listening to you and from reading the books is that, you know, we can have experts, but at the end of the day, it's not a monopoly on them to decide the future. And even though I believe that right now it is also, you know, it has shed a light on the importance of having experts talk about the important issues and not everyone having an opinion in 140 characters, because everyone panics. And at the same time, everyone should have an opinion in the future we want to create. Because which is, this is a question. Is it better to have one perspective, or can we create that one perspective with billions of others who have their own perspective of that perspective?
So I think the danger is making decisions on perspectives that don't align with reality. And of course, that's the fear that a lot of scientists and a lot of experts have, that you're going to have people that don't have all of the facts or all of the understanding making decisions. But I would counter that by saying everybody has got a stake in their own future. Everybody has got an understanding of the consequences of actions on their lives and on the lives of others. And as a result, I think that they actually have a right to be part of conversations which are going to affect their lives and the lives of others. And if we do that at the same time as recognizing that some people have got greater insights and more important insights, we can use those insights. So a really simple example is somebody walking along a cliff top towards the edge of the cliff. You wouldn't say that because you haven't got a degree in geology, you know nothing about cliffs, therefore you shouldn't have an opinion about whether you're going to drop off, or you haven't got an advanced degree in physics, so you don't understand about gravity, so you shouldn't have any opinion about whether you're going to fall to your death or not. The answer is, yeah, most people would understand that if they walk off that cliff, they're going to fall and they may well die. But that doesn't stop them taking expert advice from others that can advise them on how to not walk off the cliff.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another huge insight, is that we're all humans, therefore we all can see a future, you know? And that's an amazing thing. And yeah, so I wanted to ask you as well, I don't know if you're good with time.
I'm good, yes.
Yeah, so a few more questions. Thank you for that. Is that, you know, you mentioned a novel idea for me as well. As you can see, many novel ideas, but you say that there is this notion of the should we do it and can we do it, and
Yes.
that interplay between those questions.
Yes.
Do you see right now, and in hindsight, when you wrote the book, Films from the Future, do you see in hindsight, is the transition has the transition moved towards a should we do it or can we do it?
No, I actually think that we're in the same place as we've been for hundreds of years, in that scientists, technologists, engineers that can do things get so delighted by what they can do that they don't think about the consequences. You absolutely see that with digital technologies at the moment. Maybe things are a little bit different with artificial intelligence because we're having conversations around the ethics of AI and how to do it responsibly. But actually, I don't think that they're changing things that much. The reason I say that is you take something as simple as a smart speaker, an Alexa or Google Home or whatever,
Mhm.
and you look at how fast people are pushing out that technology and how people are using it with very, very little thought indeed of the consequences. And it's a great example of we're doing it because we can, and we're not thinking about whether we should do it. Um, so to me, it's getting more important than ever that we work out how to get people to have these more nuanced conversations about not just doing things because it's easy or it's possible, but doing things because we're doing it for the right reason and we understand the potential consequences.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great way to ask you the other question, is that do you think that science and philosophy can work together?
Oh yeah, of course. And in fact, sort of historically, they've always done that. And if you go back 100 years or so, scientists and philosophers used to work together to sort of explore the nature of the world and the universe. And we've lost some of that, I think. We've become so stovepiped into whether you're a sort of a bench scientist or whether you're a philosopher or whether you're in the humanities that we don't have those interactions.
Mhm.
But in my experience, the best, the most thoughtful scientists are always open to talking with others, listening to others, learning new things, seeing the world around them from a different perspective. And they love this landscape, this culture of ideas from different places. And
Yeah.
so not only do I think we can do this, I think we should. And I think that the best people, the best thinkers in the world, irrespective of whether they're scientists, whether humanists or others, are already doing this.
Yeah, definitely. And before we saw, for example, Plato or Aristotle going to the Greek times, they were both scientists and philosophers. You know, I don't think they fight themselves. I think they work together, as you say.
Yep.
And yeah, so one of the questions you ask the reader in Films from the Future, no, in Future Rising, sorry,
Hmm.
is a vision, and you ask which future do you see in 20 years, and how emotion, I think it was on chapter on
Right.
and you say that which future do you see in 20 years and how do you feel about it, and I want to ask you that question.
Right. That's putting me on the spot. Yeah.
Sorry.
Goodness me. There are so many different aspects of this answer to the question. So some of it is important. So if you look 20 years from now, we live in a world where you have some people that are incredibly privileged, and I put myself in that position, in that I have time in the work that I do, the work that I get paid to do, to think and to imagine, and to construct really interesting ideas. But the world is full of people that don't have that ability and that freedom because they're too tired, they're too stretched, they're struggling with poverty and disease and injustice, and so if you're looking at importance, I would love to see a future where we're beginning to sort of break down those barriers, that more people can live the lives that they want to lead. I'm looking at it in terms of the future. We all have this ability to imagine a different future. I would love to see a future where more people can actually create the future they imagine than we have at the moment. So that's, to me, that's the most important thing. But then stepping back from that, I'm just really excited about where the future is going to go. We have incredible technological abilities. We have incredible intellectual abilities. We have incredible creative abilities. I just want to see what we build with this
Mhm.
and whether we can actually learn to work together to build something that's amazing as a community rather than just individuals.
Wow. If you allow me, I'll take that as my 20-year vision.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you. Professor, I think that we've covered a lot right now, and it has been for me truly amazing. And I don't know if you listen to this. Probably you do, but remember that people like me appreciate the work that you're doing, and writing the things that you do makes one, you know, go into to his to his own mind, my mind in this case, and ask myself questions about the future that I want to live in, and bring others with me, which is hugely important, you know. So thank you for that. And is there anything that you want to add before we?
No, only to say I thank you for saying that. I know that it makes it all worthwhile, having conversations like this and hearing things like that.
Yeah. And so I'll add everything that we talked about. I'll add links in the bio. I'll add your bio as well, and everything relevant for the conversation and for your work, which I truly stand by. It's amazing. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this. We'll keep in constant contact.
That's great. No, this is great. Yeah, and so you know where I am now. So feel free just to reach out anytime.
Yeah. Professor,
I'm looking forward to hearing this. Thank you very much. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you find this conversation insightful, consider subscribing to the podcast at any podcast feed you use and share it with a friend. We truly appreciate your support.